general types of answers that people give to questions like that. The first one is art creates blank in the mind of the viewer, right? So that can be either that it explores perceptual reality or that it creates an emotional response, etc., etc. But there are some problems with this type of definition, I think. So this is a painting that is generally taken to express a psychological state or create an emotional response. Maybe this one too, or maybe that one. Or I mean, maybe I don't know what to say about this. This is a dress based on the Scream. It's made by a woman who considers herself an artist, but I think many people would call this fashion design, so I don't know what to call that. Google image search told me about it. But then the problem with this type of definition, of course, is that is anything that creates this type of emotional response in a viewer art? For example, I have a pretty strong emotional response to an image like this one, but I don't think it would be generally construed as art. Same with something like this. This could be said to express my psychological state, deliberately and unconsciously. But again, I don't think many people would say something like this is art. So sort of, okay, moving on. This is an art piece that we could say makes us question how we perceive reality. This is Joseph Koons. We're supposed to wonder what the real chair is. The chair, the image of the chair, or the definition of the word chair? I don't know. But again, does everything that makes us question our perceptual reality become art? Is this art?
Whoa!
It's tricky, right? Okay, or like, shrooms make me question my perceptual reality. But I don't think very many people would say that all people on shrooms are artists. No, that'd be great if we could change the art rules up. Okay. So the second sort of type of definition for art sort of falls under the root. Art is anything an artist says is art. This sort of works on that principle, I think. But then we have the problem of wondering, is anything an artist makes art? So like I'm an artist, right? I went to art school, and as far as I know, that's probably the only objective criteria I can think of for being an artist. So, I mean, this is art. This is my cat. Her name's Warhol. I'm going to submit her to MoMA and suggest that we hire a team of critics to follow her around and use her behavior to interpret human life. I could do that. I don't think it would make my cat art. On a similar sort of note, you probably remember hearing about this on the internet. This is an artist named Guillermo Habakuk Vargas. And so what he did is he chained this dog up in a gallery and forbid viewers to feed the dog. It was legitimized by a gallery, this gesture, but lots of people think this is an art. Tons of angry people on the internet being like, that's not art! So, I don't know what to make of that. What I'm really sort of getting at here is, what's next? Oh, okay, this is a guessing game that's going to try to illustrate my point, which is that definitions for art, traditional definitions for art, fail to account for what I observe going on in the art world. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at a couple images, and then I'm going to ask the audience, do you think the first one's art? Do you think the second one is art? Or do you think the third one is art? One of them is actually art if it was shown in a gallery. The other two are random things I found on Google. Okay, so this is image number 1. This is image number 2. And this is image number 3.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to get you to put up your hands if you think image number 1 is art. Okay. And image number 2? Okay, and image number 3. Image number 2 is art.
Damn it.
Damn it, what about 1?
1 is not art. That is full of a plinth that someone made to put their sculpture on. Anyway, so this is a piece by Peter Saville. It was shown in a show called Accessories to an Artwork. He's represented by the same person that represents Damien Hirst. Okay, so anyway, moving on along. This is image number 1 and image number 2. People who think image number 1 is art, put your hands up.
Well, I'm not
Okay. Image number 2. Okay. Image number 1 is art.
Yes.
This is called Forge. I don't forget the artist's name. I just forgot to write it down. Okay. Image number 1. Image number 2. Image number 3. Okay, so hands in the air. Who thinks image number 1 is art? Okay. Image number 2? Okay. Image number 3. Image number 1 is art. This is David Hammond's This and That. Okay. Final example. Image number 1 and number 2. So, again. So hands in the air for image number 1. Okay, hands in the air for image number 2. Image number 2 is art.
Yes.
Okay, this is a gallery in Tokyo. They have this to say about it. At Takaishi, from March 30th to April 28th, we will hold an exhibition entitled No Art, in commemoration to those who suffered and lost their lives. What to make of that? I don't know. Anyway, my thesis that I'm trying to illustrate here is that art is anything that an institution decides to call art. And the conclusion we can draw from this is that artists don't make art, institutions do. So how and why do institutions make art? That's what we're going to talk about. One of my major source books here is also one of Jess's major source books. That's why we are talking on the same thing. This is this book by Don Thompson, The $12 Million Stuffed Shark. It's a good book. It's written by an economist. It sort of takes the art world from a very simple economic perspective. I think one of the first things that I want to talk about is how the idea of what we think art is has not always been what we think art is now. Like once upon a time this was art, but we certainly can't imagine that the person making this thought anything like what a person making now thinks when they sit down to make art. Same thing with an image like this. For a long time, art in the Western world was commissioned by churches with really restrictive subject matter, religious paintings. Commissioned portraits were the large body of art in the Western world for a long time. We don't see that so much anymore. In fact, commissioned portraits are commonly not art now. So this is another commissioned portrait. And this is socialist realism. This is art in the Soviet Union, which is commonly thought to be propaganda now, but certainly was art there. And then to clarify, this is socialist realism, and this is social realism in America. And as far as I can tell, the only difference is that the Russians look happy. Okay, so this illustrates maybe some of what I'm talking about here. This is a story about this painting. A. Gill, feature writer and restaurant critic for the London Sunday Times, owned an old painting of Joseph Stalin by an unknown hand, which he said used to hang over my desk as an aid to hard work, and for which he paid $200. In February 2007, Gill offered it to Christie's for sale in a midweek auction. The auction house rejected it, saying it did not deal in Hitler and Stalin. How about if it were, and then so we asked them, how about if it were Stalin by Hearst or Warhol? And they said, well, of course, we would love to have it. So Gill contacted Damien Hirst and asked if he would paint a red nose on Stalin. Hearst did so, adding his signature below the nose. With the signature, Christie's accepted it and offered an estimate of £8,000 to £12,000. 17 bidders later, the hammer fell at £140,000. Okay. Next slide. Okay, so this is another sort of situation where things get confusing. This is a famous portrait by Warhol. This is a not so famous portrait by Warhol. In the 1970s, Warhol's work was out of fashion. He had 2 shows that didn't sell for anything sold, so he started doing commissioned portraits for $12,000. He, totally commissioned, made people look prettier than they actually were, etc., etc. How to tell the difference between his commissions and his non-commissions? In the first decade of the 20th century, long after Warhol's death, the Andy Warhol Authentication Board has exactly this problem. Judging which works are authentic Warhols, the question is not whether a work is fake or original, nor whether his hand ever touched it. It is the presence of the artist, whether Warhol at least saw the work and approved it on the way to his dealer. Scholars disagree on that criterion. They make the point that it was exactly the practice of blurring authorship and using mass production that produced his place in our history. This has resulted in chaos for collectors and dealers trying to understand what's authentic. Some pictures received directly from Warhol have been rejected by the board. It also rejected works previously authenticated by representatives of the Andy Warhol Foundation, and in some cases have reversed its previous opinion. So there's a class action lawsuit right now against the Warhol estate, the Warhol Foundation, and the Warhol Authentication Board for monopolizing the market for Warhol works. This is being brought forward by Joe Simon Whelan, owner of a 1964 Warhol self-portrait, which was received from Warhol's manager. If the Foundation and Authentication Board lose, damages could be in hundreds of millions of dollars, and the judgment might lead to hundreds of thousands of other Warhols being brought forward for authentication and offered at auction. So this is another place where the line between what is art and what isn't art really sort of starts to blur, I think. So I conclude that art as we know it was created with modernism. It is a monopoly, like any corporate monopoly. Museums and extremely wealthy collectors have vested financial interest in maintaining their hegemony on the notion of art. And I think it's important to clarify what we mean when we say extremely wealthy collectors. So the $12 million stuffed shark that this book's about, that was commissioned from Hearst by Saatchi, who is a really wealthy collector. You could liken him attaching his name to a work of art as it being branded by an important brand. So anyway, assume Mr. Cohen is the person who paid Steve Cohen $12 million for the shark, has a net worth of $4 billion to go with an annual income of $500 million before tax. At a 10% rate of returns, far less than he actually earns on the assets he manages, his total income is just over $16 million a week, or $90,000 an hour. The shark cost him 5 days of income. So, what do I have next? Okay! These collectors and museums own collections that could lose millions of dollars if the idea of what art is fundamentally changed. For example, if art were something as practical and accessible as product packaging. The nature of the financial art world is just like any other financial sector. More so, it's almost completely unregulated. So what do I mean when I say it's unregulated? This is the Wikipedia definition of a free market. A free market is a market in which there's no economic intervention and regulation by the state, except to enforce taxes, private contracts, and the ownership of property. It is the opposite of a controlled market in which the state directly regulates how goods, services, and labor may be used, priced, or distributed, rather than relying on the mechanism of supply and demand. Alright. This idea was pioneered by Adam Smith, a Scottish social philosopher and pioneer of political economy in the 1700s. You may have heard the phrase, the invisible hand of the market. This is Adam Smith. And his ideas have sort of been taken up in the 20th century by someone like Milton Friedman. He is the opposite of someone like Karl Marx. Or more contemporarily, someone like John Keynes, who was a British economist from 1883. He did a lot of work in mitigating the effects of recessions, which basically means, in this case, the creation of the welfare state. What is the welfare state? That is something like welfare, unemployment insurance, in Canada, healthcare, education, and importantly for artists, arts funding. In the 1930s, Great Depression, right? That was when FDR sort of brought through New Deal economics, which was based on Keynesian ideas. And it's sort of important to what we're talking about here. One of the things that was included in that was the American government paid artists to go around painting murals on things. Because the idea was to get money in people's hands, they would spend it, get the economy back going. Most of these murals have been destroyed. But American social realism, like the photograph we saw earlier, was a product of the same thing. Okay, moving on along. The money exchanged in the art market is literally measured in the billions.